We're going, yeah, I printed up the wrong questions. It doesn't really matter that much. I'll post the chapter 4 questions in Classroom, okay? And we'll just do the reading now, and that'll help more than anything anyway. Ready for chapter 4?
Wait. Yes.
Okay. Chapter 4. Billy Pilgrim could not sleep on his daughter's wedding night. He was 44. The wedding had taken place that afternoon in a gaily striped tent in Billy's backyard. The stripes were orange and black. It's pretty hideous. Billy and his wife, Valencia, nestled like spoons in their big double bed. Wait a second. That's curious. They nestled like spoons in their big double bed. Why does that sound familiar to me? They are spooning, but why does it sound familiar here to me? Look at the end of chapter 3. Somewhere in there was Christmas. Billy Pilgrim nestled like a spoon with the hobo on Christmas night. Oh, man. This feeling of real intimacy and of safety, that being held by someone and aligning your body to theirs. Chapter 3 ends with him doing that with the hobo on the train as they go to a prison camp. Chapter 4 opens with him in the same position with his wife. One of them on Christmas night, one of them on the night of his daughter's wedding. They're these huge, significant events, and they're being paralleled in this way. Now, students have told me, and they're not wrong, that this book is really difficult because it's so subtle, there's so much stuff. But again, that's why we keep our antennae up of, wait, that sounds familiar, that's got to mean something. And you find it. I keep using the phrase that there's echoes in this book. One phrase will just appear over and over, and you have to be aware of them. You don't have to be able to solve the puzzle of them right away. You just need to be able to kind of, wait, what's that all about? All right. They were jiggled by magic fingers. Valencia didn't need to be jiggled to sleep. Valencia was snoring like a bandsaw. The poor woman didn't have ovaries or a uterus anymore. They had been removed by a surgeon, by one of Billy's partners in the new Holiday Inn. There was a full moon. Billy got out of bed in the moonlight. He felt spooky and luminous, felt as though he were wrapped in cool fur that was full of static electricity. He looked down at his feet. They were ivory and blue. Billy now shuffled down his upstairs hallway, knowing he was about to be kidnapped by a flying saucer. The hallway was zebra-striped with darkness and moonlight, echoing the stripes of the daughter's wedding tent. The moonlight came into the hallway through doorways of the empty rooms of Billy's 2 children, children no more. They were gone forever. Billy was guided by dread and the lack of dread. Dread told him when to stop. Lack of it told him when to move again. He stopped. He went into his daughter's room. Her drawers were dumped. Her closet was empty. Heaped in the middle of her room were all the possessions she could not take on a honeymoon. She had a princess telephone extension all her own on her windowsill. Its tiny nightlight stared at Billy, and then it rang. All right, wait a second. What kind of telephone extension? It's weird that it's capitalized like a proper noun, right? Probably shouldn't be. Why would he do that? What's it an echo of? It's an echo of the dog's name that took him prisoner. Right? All these things over and over. Everything just kind of bounces off. Everything pings off one another in the book. Billy answered because the phone was ringing. There was a drunk on the other end. Billy could almost smell his breath, mustard gas and roses. It was a wrong number. Billy hung up. There was a soft drink bottle on the window. Its label boasted that it contained no nourishment whatsoever. Who called him? Who called him? Vonnegut called him. He just got a phone call from the author. He went, wrong number. Because Vonnegut spends his nights drunkenly calling people with his breath smelling like mustard gas and roses. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty cool. Was Vonnegut trying to get a hold of Billy? No, it's ironic that he would have gotten a hold of someone that he was actually on the train with, but he wasn't actually trying to talk to him. Again, all these echoes over and over. The more we pay attention to the book, the more it rewards our attention and our effort. Don't worry, we'll come back to Dresden. This book, how can I put this? I don't want to spoil anything. A thing that this book would posit is that the past is never past. It's always with us. We're always revisiting things. And as a result, Vonnegut will revisit everything over and over in the book. And every time we revisit anything, we get more details, we get more ideas of it. That's true in this novel, that's true in life. When we go back to things, we see more. We get, well, hopefully more clarity, maybe not actually. That's something we reach for, right? That we strive for. Vonnegut, as the author, will give us more clarity every time we come back to something. But it's incumbent on us to do the kind of intellectual footwork on it, to actually put in the effort to find all those moves and all those layers of meaning, right? The more we pay attention to those prior details, the more will be unearthed for us as we go. That's a good observation. Billy padded downstairs on his blue and ivory feet. He went into the kitchen where the moonlight called his attention to a half bottle of champagne on the kitchen table, all that was left from the reception in the tent. Somebody had stoppered it again. Drink me, it seemed to say. So Billy uncorked it with his thumbs. It didn't make a pop. The champagne was dead. So it goes. Wait a second. You're telling me a bottle of champagne merits a so it goes? It was all humans, and then a dog, and then an inanimate object full of bubbling liquid.
Because it's like everything goes to so it goes because it continues. It's not just.
Well, so it goes isn't necessarily talking about like this journey. It's just like, well, that's how things happen, right? Well, so it goes. Does that elevate the life of champagne, or does it demean the life of human beings? I mean, you need to come to your own conclusions, right? I think it's certainly reasonable to say it demeans the life of human beings, right? That my life is equal to that of the yeast in a champagne bottle? I don't know, man. I like to think my life has a little more worth than that. But maybe it's just that no death is more important than another. Ooh, that's a weird thought, too. I would argue some deaths are far more tragic than others, but maybe Vonnegut doesn't agree. There's also, I should mention, there's all kinds of illusions that I'm not bringing our attention to. There's all kinds of stuff like the drink me thing is an Alice in Wonderland reference, but we don't need to go through every single thing in this book. But there's a lot. Billy looked at the clock on the gas stove. He had an hour to kill before the saucer came. He went into the living room, swinging the bottle like a dinner bell, turned on the television. He came slightly unstuck in time, saw the late movie backwards, then forwards again. It was a movie about American bombers in the Second World War and the gallant men who flew them. Seen backwards by Billy, the story went like this. Okay, we're going to pause very slightly. Billy's carrying the champagne bottle like a dinner bell, right? Does that phrase ring a bell? In chapter 1, it's how Vonnegut is described holding the bottle of whiskey he takes to see Bernard O'Hare. Like everything, it's constant echoing and use of phrases. Now this next thing, talking about the movie, is an incredibly famous section in literature. It is worth, not that you're not already paying attention, but it's worth really like, okay, this scene's a big deal, right? Not just for me, for everybody, this scene's a big deal. So again, he watches a movie about American bombers in the Second World War and the men who flew them, but he watches it backwards because he's having time is getting funny on him. American planes full of holes and wounded men and corpses took off backwards from an airfield in England. Over France, a few German planes flew at them backwards, sucked bullets and shell fragments from some of the planes and crewmen. They did the same for wrecked American bombers on the ground, and those planes flew up backwards to join the formation. The formation flew backwards over a German city that was in flames. The bombers opened their bomb bay doors, exerted a miraculous magnetism which shrunk the fires, gathered them into cylindrical steel containers, and lifted the containers into the bellies of the planes. The containers were stored neatly in racks. The Germans below had miraculous devices of their own, which were long steel tubes. They used them to suck more fragments from the crewmen and planes. But there were still a few wounded Americans, though, and some of the bombers were in bad repair. Over France, though, German fighters came up again, made everything and everybody as good as new. When the bombers got back to their base, the steel cylinders were taken from the racks and shipped back to the United States of America, where factories were operating night and day. That's curious. Dismantling the cylinders, separating the dangerous contents into minerals. Touchingly, it was mainly women who did this work. The minerals were then shipped to specialists in remote areas. It was their business to put them into the ground, to hide them cleverly so they would never hurt anybody ever again. The American flyers turned in their uniforms, became high school kids. And Hitler turned into a baby, Billy Pilgrim supposed. That wasn't in the movie. Billy was extrapolated. Everybody turned into a baby, and all humanity, without exception, conspired biologically to produce two perfect people named Adam and Eve, he supposed. That's amazing. That's incredible. Okay, I want to know the story of the war movie in its normal order. What happens in the war movie? No, I want to know in its normal order, not what he tells us. If I was to sit down and watch the war movie, what happens in it? What's the first thing? What's the first thing? It's not a trick question. It's in here.
American things.
American high school kids join the military. And then what happens?
And the women were putting the soldier things in motion.
They build bombs. They mine out the minerals necessary for bombs, and they build bombs. And then what do they do with the bombs?
They
Ship them to the airfields. They put them on the planes. The kids fly up. They're now soldiers and pilots and whatever else. They fly out over Germany and France, and they drop bombs on them and kill all these people. While they do, fighter planes come up and put holes in them. They all put holes in each other. Everyone's dying. The German planes zip down and crash, and everyone dies. They finish their mission. They go back to their base. Some of them are alive, some of them are not. The planes are shot up full of holes, right? But that's what they did. What's the movie Billy watches? It's the opposite of that. You take the hurt people, you take the destroyed cities, and they fix them. They take the dangerous stuff and they make it no longer dangerous, and they hide it. And they make the world safe through the destruction of the means of war. And then the soldiers are allowed to turn into kids again. And Billy supposes that all human beings conspire together to create perfection, implying that we started out perfect and we continue to get worse. That we are evolving backwards, that we're devolving, that we get worse and worse all the time. That's an incredibly interesting passage. Is World War II seen as a noble war in our everyday lives? Absolutely. It's the only war where I think we really look at it as it was good versus evil. Like, we make video games of World War II because we feel good shooting Nazis. Does Vonnegut agree with this perspective?
No.
No. He would say ultimately all war is bad no matter what. He's a pacifist. He has seen the horrors of it, right? That doesn't mean he's a sympathizer with Nazis by any stretch. It means he understands violence is not the way, right? He doesn't want anyone to be involved in this stuff. He wants it all over and everyone to get along. It's a really interesting, it's almost like a little manifesto of how we could exist. And the Adam and Eve thing is an echo of Billy Pilgrim seeing Adam and Eve in the corporal's boots. So it's layer upon layer upon layer. Billy saw the war movies backwards and then forwards, and then it was time to go out into his backyard to meet the flying saucer. Out he went, his blue and ivory feet crushing the wet salad of the lawn. He stopped, took a swig of the dead champagne. It was like 7-Up. He knew there was a flying saucer from Tralfamador up there. He would see it soon enough, inside and out, and he would see, too, where it came from soon enough. Soon enough. Overhead, he heard the cry of what might have been a melodious owl, but it wasn't a melodious owl. It was a flying saucer from Tralfamador, navigating in both space and time, therefore seeming to Billy Pilgrim to have come from nowhere all at once. Somewhere, a big dog barked. There's a couple things we should notice here. One, the phrase "a big dog bark" is going to happen a few times in it. It's a sound cue. Whenever that sound cue happens, it's going to have significance for us. Second, we get this owl-like noise. Where have we seen owls in this book? What was it? The metal owl, the mechanical owl, which was what? What was the mechanical owl? It was in chapter 3 at the very beginning. We had a whole conversation about it. Like literally, we had a whole conversation about it. It's the optometer that he uses to diagnose people's vision, right? Billy corrects their vision with this owl-looking thing. Owls as a symbol of wisdom. And now that's how he prescribes lenses so people can see the world more accurately. And now the alien ship that's going to teach him how to see life more accurately is indeed making owl noises at him. It's all these echoes of this stuff over and over again. All right, so the saucer was 100 feet in diameter with portholes around its rim. The light from the portholes was a pulsing purple. The only noise it made was the owl song. It came down to hover over Billy and to enclose him in a cylinder of pulsing purple light. Now there was the sound of a seeming kiss as an airtight hatch in the bottom of the saucer was opened. Down snaked a ladder that was outlined in pretty lights like a Ferris wheel. Billy's will was paralyzed by a zap gun aimed at him from one of the portholes. It became imperative that he take hold of the bottom rung in the sinuous ladder, which he did. The rung was electrified so that Billy's hands were locked onto it hard. He was hauled into the airlock and machinery closed the bottom door. Only then did the ladder, wound onto a reel in the airlock, let him go. Only then did Billy's brain start working again. There were 2 peepholes inside the airlock, with yellow eyes pressed to them. There was a speaker on the wall. The Tralfamadorians had no voice boxes. They communicated telepathically. They were able to talk to Billy by means of a computer and a sort of electric organ which made every earthling speech sound. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Pilgrim," said the loudspeaker. "Any questions?" Billy licked his lips, thought a while, inquired at last, "Why me?" That is a very earthling question to ask, Mr. Pilgrim. Why you? Why us, for that matter? Why anything? Because this moment simply is. Have you ever seen bugs trapped in amber? Yes. Billy, in fact, had a paperweight in his office, which was a blob of polished amber with 3 ladybugs embedded in it. Well, here we are, Mr. Pilgrim, trapped in the amber of this moment. There is no why. That's an amazing statement. That's a brilliant way to conceptualize all this. They introduced an anesthetic into Billy's atmosphere now, put him to sleep. They carried him to a cabin where he was strapped to a yellow Barcalounger which they had stolen from a Sears Roebuck warehouse. The hold of the saucer was crammed with other stolen merchandise, which would be used to furnish Billy's artificial habitat in a zoo on Tralfamador. I love this. That there's a big lounge chair that Billy's going to sit in his zoo. Like he's going to be in a cell, like a big kind of observational thing. He'll be naked. We already have had that established. And he'll be sitting in like a lounge chair the whole time while aliens look at him. I don't know, it makes me laugh.